Hey everyone! I can't believe I'm doing the July video already! This year is just flying by. This was a busy month. I managed to make a lot of videos, and I also found time to watch a lot of movies, so we have a long list ahead of us. I'll try to keep it moving. Let's get started. Movie number 1, Chain Lightning. This is a 1950 post-war movie starring Humphrey Bogart as a flashy pilot who gets hired by Raymond Massey after the war to test a potentially record-breaking new plane. The job gets even more interesting when it turns out Bogart's old flame from his war days, played by Eleanor Parker, is working as Massey's secretary. To be honest, a lot of the details about this one have faded from my memory. I saw it at the beginning of the month, so it's been a while. It was alright. Bogart was Bogart, a little more on the morose side. Eleanor Parker looked gorgeous. Massey was more humorous than I often find him. He and Bogart were both very reckless characters, and I don't like too much recklessness. Movie number 2, as I promised last month, is The Maze Runner: The Death Cure. This third and final movie in the Maze Runner trilogy came out just a few months ago. I'm really glad I waited until all the movies were out before I started watching them. It makes for a much more positive, cohesive viewing experience. I thought this last movie was okay. I definitely preferred the first one over both sequels. It felt more self-contained, the maze effects were cool, and for the most part, it did its own thing instead of following a formula. Both sequels felt more generic and unoriginal. There must be a list of things that writers and publishers and studio executives believe need to be part of a movie like this, like love triangles, epic showdowns, big things blowing up. Although I do suspect that the producers did pay attention to criticism of the second movie, because there were some things introduced there that seemed backpedaled in this one, which was smart. I did find a lot of the kids, most of them are over 25, kind of bland, so it was especially disappointing when they killed off the most interesting character. They also made me feel old because I got tired of not being able to understand half the dialogue and had to stop 20 minutes in to turn on the subtitles. Stop mumbling, people! Kids. Movie number 3, Train to Busan, or Busan. Not sure about the pronunciation there. This one's a Korean zombie movie from 2016. I'd never seen a Korean film before, so this was a new experience. This first caught my attention several months ago when I heard that the story was about a small group of survivors caught on a train during a zombie outbreak. That's an isolated location story, and I love those. Fortunately, I was really happy with this one. I think it's one of the better zombie movies I've seen because it tells a compelling human story. It focuses on a workaholic absentee father going through a divorce who's taking his unhappy little girl on the train to be with her mother. He's a selfish guy who lives by the rule that you always need to put yourself first, but when chaos starts erupting and he has to look out for his child, all his priorities are challenged, leading to a great character arc. These were fast zombies, which kind of reminded me of the zombies in World War Z and the frenzied way they'd move and bunch up against something and tumble all over each other, which does look a little comical. I believe I saw this touted as one of the scariest movies to come out in the last couple years. I did not find it very frightening, but it is tense and suspenseful, and surprisingly emotional, which was something I did not expect. So I'd say, if you don't mind subtitles and it sounds interesting, you should check it out. Movie number 4 is a World War II movie, Flying Leathernecks from 1951. I know I'd never seen this movie before, but I feel like I've seen a movie a lot like it within the last year, and it might have even had John Wayne in it. Wayne plays a by-the-book CO taking over a fighter squadron at Guadalcanal, but the men expected that their second, played by Robert Ryan, would be given the position, which of course leads to friction between them and Wayne and between Ryan and Wayne. It's not a bad movie, it's just not particularly original. I most liked the brief scenes with Wayne and his family at home, and the contention over tactical maneuvers was interesting. It was also interesting that this was set on Guadalcanal, since we've watched at least one other movie recently about the fighting there, so it was neat to see another perspective. The weakest thing, aside from a certain lack of originality, was the heavy use of stock footage. The movie's filmed in Technicolor, so it looks really good, except for the stock footage, which is grainy and awful, and according to my dad, they weren't even careful about what footage they used. He spotted discrepancies with single and double-engine planes. So, yeah, this one wasn't great. Movie number 5, on the other hand, is a war movie that I really enjoyed, Stand By for Action. I wasn't expecting a whole lot from this war movie from 1942. The IMDb score was pretty average, but oh my goodness did I enjoy it! It stars Robert Taylor, Brian Donlevy, and Charles Laughton, and I loved all 3 of them in this movie. Even Walter Brennan, whose characters I often find a little annoying, was very endearing as an old sailor devoted to his ship, a clunky old World War I destroyer that gets recommissioned for action for World War II. The biggest thing, though, is that I did not expect this movie to be so funny. I've said before that I don't really care for war comedies. This one wasn't advertised to me as a comedy, though, so maybe that's why it worked so well. The comedy wasn't the main point. I don't want to say too much on the off chance that you decide to watch it, because I think it works better if you don't see it coming, but there's an outrageous situation that crops up involving some unexpected cargo, and it's made even better by the characters' reactions. It's got some corniness, and it's a little predictable, but it made me laugh a lot, and I think I loved it. I wish I could say the same for movie number 6, Annihilation. This sci-fi movie came out earlier this year. I wasn't planning to watch it so soon after reading the book by Jeff Vandermeer, but it was there at the library and I just compulsively checked it out. Because I'd recently read the book, I was very aware of how many things they changed, which was a lot, and at a certain point I was like, none of this happened in the book, unless I misread something, which is entirely possible because it's not the kind of book that explains all the weird stuff that happens. But even just taking the movie on its own and ignoring the book, I didn't much care for it. Slow, artsy sci-fi isn't really my thing, and I didn't see any reason why certain scenes had to be moved out of sequence. It didn't seem to have a point, unlike in, say, Arrival, which I also didn't love, but at least the non-sequential storytelling there had significance that was explained at the end in a satisfying way. I also felt like this movie was devoid of emotion, and maybe I shouldn't complain about that since the book was also pretty detached, intentionally so, but I got the impression that the movie had tried to add emotional connections between the characters. It just failed. That bear scene was crazy, though. That's the kind of thing that nightmares are made of. Movie number 6 is another war movie, but it's more of a romantic drama set during World War II. It's Vacation from Marriage, also known as Perfect Strangers, from 1945. Robert Donat and Deborah Carr play a couple whose married life has become very dull. He's a schedule-driven accountant, and she's a frumpy housewife with a constant cold. Things are shaken up by the outbreak of war. He joins the Navy, and she joins the Wrens. But because their leave never coincides, 3 years go by before they're able to meet again. And by that time, they've both changed so much that they're afraid to see each other and try to pick up where they left off. I've known of this movie for some time, but I never got around to seeing it, even though I've tried to see as many Robert Donat movies as possible, but I think I was put off by the title. Turns out, though, it was much better than I expected. Funny, romantic, the leads were both great, plus I enjoyed Glynis Johns as Carr's spunky friend. Robert Donat, of course, was the highlight for me. There's one scene toward the end in which he tells his friend to shut up, and it's one of the softest, most elegant, appealing shut-ups I've ever heard. This is definitely one to check out if you're a Robert Donat fan. Movie number 7 is The Return of Dracula from 1958. This was a viewer recommendation, so thank you, 180 Juggalo. It puts a 1950s America spin on the Dracula story. The Count flees his home country, murders a fellow countryman and immigrant to America on the train, assumes his identity, and installs himself in the man's family's home in California, where of course he takes a fancy to the pretty young daughter. The contemporary touch here was really different, and to be honest, I think I liked this one better than Son of Dracula, which was Universal's attempt to bring Dracula to America in the 1940s. I liked the contrast between the very regular, commonplace, middle-class characters and the mysterious Count, masquerading as Cousin Belak. Belak? I figured out that Belak is Caleb spelled backwards, but they never say anything about it, and Caleb doesn't have any significance in the Dracula legend, so I think that's just a coincidence. I enjoyed the various performances, mostly from actors who I don't think I recognize from anything else, especially the cute, likable boyfriend next door who, thank goodness, didn't turn whiny and petulant. The Universal influence was definitely there, but Francis Lederer didn't seem to be doing a Bela Lugosi imitation. I liked his Dracula. Well, he didn't sound so much like Dracula to me. I thought the man who was tailing him, the Van Helsing character, had a voice better suited for the Count, deeper, thicker accent, but Lederer had good presence. He was able to turn on the charm whenever necessary, and then wipe it away to show his disgust and disdain for the living. This Dracula really relishes and rejoices in his undead state. Some interesting trivia that I'll tease you with: this movie is about 99% black and white, but there's one single color shot. I did not know that was coming, so that was a fun, startling surprise. Movie number 8, yes, I put my hair up because I'm getting hot. Movie number 8 is 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. This was one of the big Oscar contenders and winners this year, the story of a woman who publicly challenges the local police after they fail to find her daughter's killer. To be honest, I'm not totally sure how I felt about this one. I liked some parts and didn't like others. It's one of those things where the actors do a great job, but you don't always like their characters or their characters' actions. People who are in the right sometimes do a despicable thing, and sometimes a despicable character gets an unexpected chance at redemption. I did like that part of it. I like it when a story unexpectedly starts changing my opinion about someone for the better. I never quite knew where this movie was going, and I think a lot of its power and entertainment value lies in that element of surprise. I did kind of admire Frances McDormand's character's boldness in saying whatever she thinks. There's something liberating about that, even if you're just watching someone else do it. But it still made me cringe. A lot of the stuff she says is just so abrasive. And I gotta say, there's a lot of colorful language in this movie, so if language is an issue for you, keep that in mind. The bottom line with this one is that I'm still mulling it over. Movie number 9 is one I've really been anticipating, this year's A Quiet Place. I've been looking forward to seeing this since it came out a few months ago, and I was not disappointed at all. I thought it was great. It's got a lot of things that I like to see in a scary movie. Very few characters, a small setting, not too much monster, but just enough to whet your appetite, and heart and humanity at the center. I thought the directing and the writing and the acting were all excellent. It was really tense from start to finish, with only a slight pause for breath between one event and the next. I appreciated that it wasn't too long. It's less than 90 minutes, and it doesn't drag things out or make you sit through some lengthy, unnecessary exposition. It also does a really good job setting an event up and then delivering the payoff. Like the thing with the nail, oh my goodness, that was so stressful. I was really happy with this, and I'm not often happy with horror movies these days, so that's saying a lot. Movie number 10 is kind of a different one for me, Isle of Dogs. So, my dad wanted to see this, which was really strange because it's not the kind of thing he'd ever want to watch, so we were all shocked when, after seeing the ad on TV a few times, he said he wanted to see it. I guess you just never know. We had fun watching it though. It's quirky and unusual. We'd never seen a movie quite like this before, and that might be partly because this was our first Wes Anderson film. The plot isn't the most original, but I think the enjoyment of watching it comes more from the style, the humor, the voice acting, the artistry. It got quite a few chuckles out of us, many of them reactions to unexpected visuals. It's creative, fascinating to look at, humorous, but with a soul, even though I did feel a sense of detachment from reality, but that seems like a, well, duh thing to say, because this is not a realistic movie at all. I loved the main pack of friendly dogs on Trash Island, lots of fun moments there, I think that was my favorite thing. Movie number 11 was another big Oscar contender and winner this year, I, Tonya, all about Tonya Harding and the biggest figure skating scandal in history. Like Three Billboards, I'm not totally sure how I feel about this one. The way the story is told is often very humorous, and yet much of the subject matter is depressing and disturbing, so you get this strange tonal imbalance, and you don't know whether you're supposed to laugh or be horrified. I'm not a huge Tonya Harding fan myself. Her artistic style usually doesn't appeal to me, but her skating was full of energy and power, and the movie does a good job showing that, in addition to making me feel very sympathetic toward her in light of her awful mother and ex-husband. I constantly wondered how much of what I was seeing was true, and I think the movie plays that up, constantly making you question things and showing the main characters contradicting each other. My favorite thing was the fourth wall breaks, like the scene where Tonya fires the shotgun at Jeff, then turns to the camera and says something like, "I never did this." Some scenes were shot really well, too, with some great camera movement, and I appreciated the clever incorporation of the soundtrack, which was just excellently timed. I do want to throw another content advisory in for this one, though. Again, if you're sensitive to swearing, heads up. These characters swear a lot. Movie number 12 is Ride the High Country. This 1962 Western was recommended by 3 of my viewers, so thanks to all of you. It stars Randolph Scott in his last role and Joel McCrea as 2 aging gunmen who take a dangerous job transporting gold out of a mining community. This movie, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, made me feel really grateful that I wasn't born in the Wild West, where women were scarce and men, consequentially, acted like animals. This movie has one of the most nightmarish wedding scenes I've ever witnessed. Yikes. My favorite part of the whole movie was when everyone's fighting after the wedding in this brothel turned town hall, apparently, and Joel McCrea bursts in and saves the day. My hero! There's a running commentary on the old versus the young, and I really enjoyed this theme of the weathered older men commiserating with each other and wondering if it isn't time to quit. I didn't like the young characters, though. Maybe that's because I'm 20-something going on 80, so of course I'm going to side with the old-timers, but the young people were just so reckless and stupid. Well, I suppose the guy grew on me by the end. He learned his lesson. But the damsel in distress was so frustratingly naive. Or maybe she wasn't naive. Maybe she just kept changing her mind and sending mixed signals. Whatever, this girl makes some really dumb decisions that get everybody else in trouble, and what makes me crazy is that she has ample opportunity to back out when it becomes obvious that what she's doing is a bad idea. And yet she goes through with it! Ah, what's wrong with you? And then someone good gets killed because of it. Grrr! It was a good movie, I liked it, I just didn't like her. Movie number 13 is Panic in the Streets. I'd seen this 1950 film several years ago, but, well, I was really sleepy the first time, so it was good to see it again. Richard Widmark stars as a military medical expert who's called in when local authorities fish a body out of the water that is riddled with plague. The trouble is, someone shot him and dumped his body there. The hunt is on for his killer, who is most likely carrying the disease and unwittingly contaminating everyone with whom he comes in contact. Disease movies have kind of developed their own subgenre now, but that wasn't the case when this movie came out, so it's interesting to compare how this movie handles a potential outbreak situation as opposed to how we've seen it done in later movies. But I don't want to mislead you. It's as much a manhunt movie as it is an outbreak movie, with Widmark and the ornery police captain, played by Paul Douglas, joining forces to track down the killer, who was played by Jack Palance. Don't worry, I'm not giving anything away. That happens in the first scene. Palance plays his tough guy role with such softness and tenderness. It's fascinating. Don't be deceived, though. He'll have no compunction about shooting you in the back if he has to. The entire film, directed by Elia Kazan and set around the New Orleans docks, has a unique, gritty realism and slightly noirish feel. And it's a really good movie for Richard Widmark fans, too. Movie number 14 is The Train. I'd seen the last part of this 1964 World War II movie before, but obviously I didn't remember it correctly because the two things I thought for sure were going to happen didn't. This is a tense, slower-paced action film about the French underground trying to stop a trainload of paintings from being taken away to Germany. Burt Lancaster stars as the station master and member of the Resistance, who does not consider saving the art a top priority, yet who, in an ironic twist, ends up leading the mission to save it. Paul Scofield co-stars as the Nazi colonel obsessed with getting the art to Germany at all costs. I've seen Scofield in 3 war movies this year. That's interesting. He really prowls in this role. I must admit, no matter how many of these movies I see about Nazis stealing art during the war, where characters make passionate speeches about the paintings representing the glory of France, etc., it still doesn't justify the loss of human life in my mind. A lot of people are killed in this movie, and I can't help thinking, is it really worth it? Those passionate speeches fail to convince me. But regardless of that, this is a good movie. Tense, with a fascinating execution of a clever plan to pull a fast one on the Germans, which is always fun. Great special effects, and a very athletic role for Lancaster. That's it, everybody. I feel like these monthly videos are just getting longer and longer. I hope you enjoyed this list, and of course, if you have any thoughts on any of the movies that I mentioned, please share them in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching!